Welcome to the second video of lesson 4, where we will be talking about optimization in Leap. I expect this to be one of the longer videos because we have quite a lot to cover, but it is one of the most advanced and essential features of Leap. In this video, we will be talking about optimization in Leap. This we will do for electricity, and we will touch on other sectors as well as we will also cover demand load curves as well as just full system load curves. We will touch briefly on different solvers, and we will look quite a lot into optimization results, and we will also touch shortly on boundary conditions. So let's just have a quick recap from lesson 3, the last video in lesson 3, where we were talked about load shapes, about time slices, and about merit order for our production in electricity. The first thing to do is to say that we no longer have merit order, because this is what we instead optimize. So that's basically what we do with the optimization. Instead of us deciding how to invest and use our electricity generation technologies, we let the model decide for us. But load shapes and time slices also plays a crucial part in optimizing our supply sectors, just as it did without optimization. So just a quick recap. In the general tab in our analysis, we have the time slices and yearly shapes. Time slices define how many time slices and how they look like in our model, so how we divide a certain year or a model year into different hours and what this means. And yearly shapes is what comes out of this in terms of different consumptions and production patterns. So these two also are quite important for our optimization. So here we're just taking a closer look at a load shape curve. In this case, we have 4 seasons up here. So 4 seasons. And for all of these, we have 24 hours. So every day is counted as the same in this case. And we have then differences between the seasons. This could readily be something like a PV production that occurs more in the summer, have a high peak in the summer, and then almost has nothing in the winter, and occurs in more or less the middle of the day, depending on where we are. This we can define for both our supply sectors and later on also our demand sectors. But now I want you to remember this for our different electricity generating technologies. So just a quick introduction to optimization. So in Leap, we need a few things to be able to do optimization. So of course, we need to have cost of transformation, because the model would do a least cost optimization. This is similar to most other energy supply models. Therefore we need to have both fixed and variable cost, as well as CapEx cost for our different technologies. These should be for all technologies in all of the scenarios that we optimize for. There is no way around it. We also need to cost our effects if we want the model to optimize for that as well. We do not need to have a cost for effects if we just want boundaries, let's say a cumulative CO2 emissions before a certain year. But if you want to take externality costs into effects, then we also need to have those costed, of course. Then we need at least one load shape, that is the one for consumption in our time slices. We also can have a few different load shapes for especially variable renewable energies, and maybe also for something like hydro that has seasonal variation. Then it's also a good idea to have effects on our demand sectors, where we can show the CO2 emissions and show the different things. Of course, this is only if you want to take externality effects or boundaries for effects into account, but then do need to be there to see how much we are emitting throughout our analysis and our optimization. Now, optimization in Leap is only for the transformation sector. So resources, which are of course upstream from our transformation, cannot be optimized at the same time. So therefore, if we had not set up our transformation sector correctly, then resources will follow. So we cannot optimize for, let's say, supply of domestic resources and so on. That is a result coming from the transformation and demand. Also, we cannot optimize demand in Leap. So Leap does not decide the policies in our demand sectors. Then also we need to have NEMO installed, which is the new extra part to Leap, which you can find on the SharePoint. That helps us do optimization. The old system Osmosis cannot do storage, so it is very important that we do install NEMO. NEMO also has more options for optimization engines, which is very, very beneficial, as we will look into later on. To check if we have NEMO properly installed, we can go and see that in the help menu here. I just want to touch quickly on optimization and speed. So to do optimization, we need an optimization solver. Now these solvers can both be free and open source, but they can also be industrial strength solvers, so to speak, that are bought on license. And they differ quite much in how quick they can be, how well they can utilize your CPU or GPU, and therefore also how fast we can do our optimizations. So in Leap we generally have had 4 solvers available. So we have this standard DLPK solver, which is a free solver, but it also is quite slow. On my laptop with the model that we're working on, which is also available on SharePoint, it took me about 9.5 minutes for each scenario to calculate. But it is a free and inbuilt solver that also works in Osmosis. Then generally we also have been able to use Cplex, which is a very fast, very good solver. It's mostly meant for servers, but it can also work on desktops, but it is very expensive. It should also be said that Cplex is used by both Balmoral and Times models, therefore it is included in that. So it should be able to utilize the Cplex if you also have Balmoral or and Times installed, though I have not actually tried. Then another industrial solver is the so-called MOSEC solver, which is quite a fast solver, which is also and it has a cost. It's not used in most places. I haven't actually tried it here because I don't have access. It does cost a medium amount of sum, which is a one-time fee of $2,000 and then $500 a year for upkeep, and then improves this solver. Then we also have the open source CBC solver, which is included in NEMO. It's quite fast. It's twice as fast for me as the DLPK solver. Rounding out at about 4 minutes per scenario when I've done the calculations for this lesson. It is also free and included, and it is also the one that I have used throughout this lesson. So I recommend that this solver. Now, to add optimization to model, we have to go through a few steps, but it is quite easy. For one, the optimization is only occurring in transformation, so we need to have transformation on. it is least cost optimization, meaning we do need to have costs, so we need to have costs on. And if we want to have effects like boundary conditions and also externality cost, we need to have energy effects on as well. So these three are necessary, or at least recommended. Two of them are necessary and one is recommended for running optimization. To add optimization to a transformation module in Leap, it's quite easy. We just have to go down to the chosen transformation sector, which is usually electricity generation that we want to act our optimization on. Click on the sector under transformation itself, and we will find this little tab called Optimize. Now this is set as 0 or as no, meaning there's no optimization. It is just a deterministic model, a simulating model. And now we can go and choose how we want to optimize it. I'm going to choose CPC because I have that installed, and it is the faster of GLPK and CPC for this model. Now you can see we have it on, and the chart kind of changes, but that's just because it goes from a 0 to a apparently 7. Then we can also see that this is actually something we can do scenario-wise. So we could have a baseline scenario where we don't have any, but we do not have any simulation, and then maybe a policy scenario where we do have optimization. This means we can also do a scenario with least cost projection. Now, in our generation technologies within our where we just applied the optimization, we do see some changes in the variables we can put on. So, for one, the first simulation year is assumed in the optimization, so that goes away. We can no longer define that by ourselves. Dispatch rule. Well, we no longer decide how to dispatch. That is optimized directly, so that also is not something we can change anymore. And then, of course, as we saw in lesson 3, endogenous capacity is us choosing how we want to add technologies when investments are needed. That is no longer chosen by us, the user. That is again something that is optimized by the model itself. Though, on the other hand, we now get minimum capacity, maximum capacity addition, and minimum capacity addition, and optimized new capacity. This optimized new capacity, that is a optimization result actually. It's being saved here because then Leap has a place to refer to when you are in the results, and also for next time. So that's like a good way to measuring that. You can also then see what your new capacities are, but these are optimized. Minimum and maximum capacities and capacity additions refer to technology-wise what is the minimum and maximum capacity in the entire system, and at any given one time that you can have maybe in the model, so you can set boundaries. So for instance, a nuclear power plant will usually be above 1,000 megawatts per unit, while a wind turbine can be all the way down to 2. That means the minimum capacity addition is quite different for these, but on the other hand, it might be impractical in terms of land area to have too many wind turbines in your country. There might be an upper limit for that. So you can, even though there is a demand for that, so that you can input into maximum capacity. In optimization, to account for the intermittent production from renewables such as wind and solar, we can define their patterns or availability using the maximum availability variable in the transformation process. So here we can see we have done that with the yearly shape solar V2 for solar PV. That is a specific shape that has been made under our general shapes, where if we go down and find it, we can see here that we have a general shape that functions on every single hour in our different seasons that we have chosen. So that has been made specifically for this analysis. So that solar is nice and predictable, though intermittent, so we can tell how much the maximum availability would be in any given hour, assuming the sun and the general weather patterns. Then for wind, which is generally a little bit more intermittent and unpredictable, we are now here saying that we give it a percentage of the total capacity that's available in full load hours per season. So here we have used the seasonal grouping value, and we put a percentage number of the total full load hours or full load hour number in for each season. So in this case, 25% for 25% of the full load hours is available in the summer, 50% in the spring, it's 60% in the fall, and in winter 50%. As we can see here, we now have storage technologies in Leap. This is quite a new feature, so it's still a little bit under development. But how to define the energy storage? Well, you do that as most other technologies, except you also set a full load hours, which is how long it takes to discharge a battery, or how long you can discharge a battery for under its capacity. So this number of hours is multiplied by the capacity in the optimization to find the energy capacity of your battery. Also, you input your minimum charge in percentage compared to of the full capacity of the battery. Meaning, like in this case, if this was a battery, or a lithium-ion battery, there's a minimum charge that has to be left not to ruin the battery. So we can set that here. So how do you add a storage process or storage technology in your Leap model? Quite easy. You find in your you find the output or the generation for your output. In this case, electricity. We want to store electricity. Go into the processes, and then we just say we want to add a new technology or new process. Now here we can see we have generally the name and the feedstock fuel as we always had. But by choosing this storage process on, the feedstock fuel goes away because we're storing the same as our output fuel. And we could say that these are batteries, for instance. Okay, and now we have a new storage methodology in our system. And of course, you can have multiple with multiple characteristics and capacities. So you could use this for pumped hydro, lithium-ion batteries, maybe even compressed air energy storage, and more, whatever is available in your system. Now, optimization takes quite a long time, so I will also just introduce how we can work with outside optimization. Because if we would like to work with optimization, we can gather results on our transformation sector quite easily. We don't have to change much because the optimization takes care of that for us. But that also means if we have to check our demand sector, we might run into issues every time we want to test our results for demand sectors, because we have to optimize every time. So we can solve that quite easily. We can just disable transformation and resources, and we no longer optimize, nor do we see results for resources or transformation. it's worth remembering that if we have data in any of these checkboxes here, and we take them off, the data does not get deleted, they just do not get included and they visibly disappear. If we take them on again, we have the exact same as we left them. So in this way, if we take the transformation resources on, we can concentrate on our demand side without accidentally having to run up the optimization or hurting in our transformation resources side by accident. So that's quite a practical way we can do that in terms of workflow. Now, we can do things in terms of load curves. We can do two things for our demand. The general standard load curve, if we look here in our settings inside calculations, this is where we are looking at quite a lot of things for our special optimization. Usually what we're using is just one load curve for the entire system. I have included one in the model that's a percentage of annual generations, and Leap can help you do that. And that means it's like the total demand curve. So that means we have a specific energy or electricity demand in mind for our total system within our time slices, or the different hours or days or whatever in our time slices. Now, if we instead choose this one that are marked, each demand device system, and it's not shown here, that says only show for electricity, then for every place in our demand sector where we have electricity as a fuel, we can now define our own load shapes, which has quite a few benefits. So if we go back into our yearly shape menu, you can see here there has been added quite a lot of different load curves for demand sectors. So I can also put them in for our supply sectors, which I will show you. But here for our demand sectors first, we have widely different. You cannot see they're widely different, but we do have widely different demand shapes or load curves for something like air conditioning, which is highest in the summer during the hours when people just return home from work, to a hot house, to heating, which is exactly the opposite, when it has its peak in wintertime when people are returning home to a cold house, or in the night when it's even colder, to something like exterior lights, which is only on when it is in the dark hours, to something like refrigerators, which is quite stable. So we can define the load curves for each of these, and we can do that all the way down. It's also suggested to have a just general load curve until you maybe find the specific load curves that you're looking for your country. But generally speaking, those are fairly easy to get from academic resources. So if you have all these load curves input into our model, we can go into our specific technologies. Here I've chosen in households and air conditioning, and you can see I have two technologies that run on electricity, current and efficient. So these now have a new variable called load shape. In this variable, I can choose how my load shape looks like, and I can just choose yearly shape. I can go over to the E, and it will suggest the yearly shape functions by itself, and then we can freely choose for each version or each different load curve we have put in our menu. So here, of course, we would like to take air conditioning, which is this one, but you can see we also actually have shown up the solar load curve that we will be using in our supply sector. We could do something similar to hydro, or again also the general I have, but in this case we're choosing air conditions because it's applicable. Now for boundary conditions, I also want to show you how to add that to your model. So boundary conditions are, for instance, a maximum amount of PM2.5, CO2 emissions, and so on that we want our model to strictly adhere to. when doing and just a simulation model when we choose our cells, we would check that with our different results. But of course, we cannot do that with an optimization model. So instead, we have to tell the model that at some years or in some function that we can know we can have nothing more of these emissions throughout our model runtime. So here in effects, now we have added effects. We can see we have the different effects where we have also applied throughout our model on the different emissions. Now here we see we have externality cost as we looked at in lesson 3, but we also got another one now that we are optimizing. It's called annual emission constraint. So here we can on an annual basis tell the model that we need to constrain our optimization in that. This we can do on scenario basis, so we could easily make scenarios that are not constrained and some that are, which is a good comparison to have. I also want to just showcase that here we can see there is a new function that we haven't seen before. It's called interp FSY. And what this model does is just an interp function with the acceptance that the base year or the current accounts number is not applied. So you can see the 2019 value, which is our current account in this case, is a few billion because it's unlimited, which is a general method we have. And then we want to, in 2020, we want that to be just 1,000 million metric tons. So we want to go from something unlimited to 1,000 metric tons in 2020. But if we had an interp with that, we would also count the years in between. But here we actually just start in the year 2020. That is the important part with the interp FSY. We could of course also do this for something like PM2.5, which is something that might be very applicable if you have an urban system or municipal system. So that could be quite interesting to do. So the optimization runs when you just click on the results button, and this window will pop up. This window here, this is Leap and NEMO talking together, and I just want to clarify a few things before you get surprised by yourself. So all these data will come up, and that is Leap sending to NEMO, to NEMO, and then in the end you will get something like this when you're using CBC, and then there will be no more data, or this window will be stagnant and nothing will happen, and Leap will showcase not responding. This is perfectly fine and perfectly natural. NEMO runs in the background and does not quite show data as it is running when it is doing its optimization. This window, as you may be able to see, it says optimize Leap scenario, in this case policy using NEMO CBC. So that means a new window will pop up for each scenario. So it will blink back and forth when you are running multiple scenarios, which you absolutely can do. So the model that I included in the SharePoint has 5 scenarios and 31 years going from 2019 to 2040. When I calculated all of these, and these have quite a lot of things in, some have the constraints, some has storage, and some have both. It took my computer, which is a decently powerful laptop, 28 minutes, which I think is applicable for most other people. CBC does not use your entire CPU, so you can do other things meanwhile, but just be aware that it does take some minutes per scenario. Running a model with optimization can take quite a long time. So if I accidentally kind of forget that I have optimization on and I want to stop it, I started by using results, and I will get a window up here from NEMO saying if I regret this, I can always press Control-C, and you can see it asks me if I want to terminate my batch job, when I did the interrupt exception, I'm going to say yes, and Leap is going to throw me an error saying that I may have solved the solver window being closed prematurely. This was on purpose. Do I want to watch debug information? No. Good. Now I'm just back and I can continue to work on and nothing happened. And I may just have saved 10 minutes that I didn't want to spend on watching the model run. Now we will look at the model results for our optimization, and that's what the rest of this video will be. So here we're looking at the energy generation for all our time slices. It should be noted that, of course, the way that we have done our time slices, where we have 24 hours in spring, summer, fall, and winter, means that we will have some quite harsh differences where these seasons differ from each other. So you can clearly see that here in our wind utilization, where we assume that we can get quite a good amount of wind in the different scenarios, but that where we have a pretty big disparity between them. But that is because that's where we change our season. So that's useful to notice as well. We can see in this system in 2019. Where we have our policy with storage, but this is in our start year, that we have a good mix of both renewable, zero emission, and fossil resources. What's quite good to note, or worth to remark in this scenario, is that we have the flexibility in our scenarios mainly comes from our natural gas combined cycle, which is a pretty flexible and dispatchable technology that then supplies our the flexibility for the different hours of short-term flexibility. We can also see, just like we stated in the inputs, that there are quite a lot of different productions or energy consumption of hydro, because between where summer is quite a lot lower than the rest of the seasons. So we can see this in this scenario on an hourly basis. If we then start to move this scenario towards 2040, we can see that we are investing in quite a lot of wind. We are limiting our natural gas in most of the seasons. And then we are starting to apply more, slightly more solar, but that's more expensive here. But also storage becomes a big part of our energy generation. So worth noting, blue here is energy storage. So here we can see that we are using quite a lot of energy for storage. That is us charging our batteries, and here we are discharging our batteries. So that means we get some storage back from or fuel back from the system. We can also see in this case, which is quite interesting, that we probably wouldn't see otherwise if you haven't optimized, that our summer months are very dependent on our natural gas combined cycle, and we use quite a lot of energy there in some of the peak hours. So we could probably do a lot of different investing or de-investing in that if we could somehow demand side manage or use DSM on our air conditioning, for instance, our big loads in the summer months. While this model, we can also see, is quite happy to invest in wind, and less happy to invest in most other resources. Other than the natural gas combined cycle, we can actually see that we are more or less fossil free in 2040, which is of course what we want to achieve with these policies, and storage towards 2040. It should be noted that there are no boundary C2 batteries in this. Otherwise, there's a good chance that this combined cycle natural gas also would maybe be limited and be replaced with other technologies. Here we see another model results. Here I've shown just the time slices for spring. So this is a day in spring. So just 24 hours. And we can see how the different in 2019 in this case, and we can see the role that that the different technologies had in this hour. If you now see here for the same scenario in 2040, we can see that we have suddenly a very green system where we are using only renewable resources. This is a different scenario, so there is only renewable resources in 2040, except for some maybe very minor natural gas in summertime. But here we have a spring, and we can see we just have the renewable resources, and it's very, very dependent on wind. Here we can also see that due to the optimization in the hours here with relatively low demand but high PV production around noon, the model utilizes this time by itself to charge our batteries that then gets discharged for the consumption in the peak hours. So this is an economic optimization which occurs quite smartly, so it figures that out by itself. And we can even see that it only uses this battery in the peak charges, but actually the model uses extra wind and some hydro. This must be running hydro more or less, probably not. Uses this extra wind capacity and hydro to charge our batteries at opportune times throughout the day, and then only having the discharge during the peak hours where the sun has gone down and people are returning from work according to our model. Now here we have the same model results, but in quite different ways, where we are looking at the development over time in our scenario. This is our baseline scenario, and here we can see how our electricity supply is increasing over the timeline, but this increase is mostly due to all the wind power we are investing in, or the model chooses to investing in, while we let our natural gas combined cycle be almost the same as it was in the beginning. We invest quite heavily in it in the beginning, maybe to probably to add some flexibility to our system. We can also see that we have retired manually or exogenously retired nuclear from 2030. If you now change this to the policy scenario where we also have externality costs in, we can see we still retire the nuclear, but our amount of natural gas combined cycle has decreased quite a lot, because fossil emissions now have a price tag. This means that solar has a larger place in our system, as well as even more wind power. Here in this model results, I'm taking the policies with the externality scenarios over the different year range, and then I am comparing it directly using the differences versus baseline to the capacity added in our transformation results. So that means that what does the policy scenario with externalities invest in that compared to the baseline? So you can see even here quite early, there's a very big investment in natural gas in our baseline scenario that then gets replaced entirely by wind, a higher investment or higher capacity added in wind in comparison. This is of course because not all the capacity on our wind is available at all times, so we overinvest in terms of capacity to fulfill the same demand. Then we can also see throughout the years we have quite some investments in solar later on. Around about the time where we're about to divest in nuclear or retire nuclear, but where the But the other scenario, the baseline scenario, actually invests more in wind at this time and in natural gas. But again, in the policy scenario with externalities, we have invested quite a lot in wind early on. So that's not really where we put our investments or in our capacity additions later on in the model. It is worth to note that we invest quite a lot more in energy storage that is not happening in the baseline scenario, probably to control our intermittent sources that are both solar and wind, that is emphasized in that scenario. Here, I just took again the scenario policy within externalities and made the difference between the baseline, but where I was looking at the 100-year global warming potential, and we can then see exactly where we are saving all this CO2 or GHG emissions. By far the biggest place that we are saving that, or where it is emitted in the baseline scenario, where it is not emitted in the scenario policy scenario, comes from natural gas combined cycled. And this includes demand as well, because the demands are more or less equal in these two scenarios, how we are set up. But that could also be from electric cars and so on. We would also have that shown here. Now here, I took the year of 2040 and compared the social cost between all the scenarios. So we can now see here that we have the baseline scenario is actually the most expensive in social cost, while the one that we have emission constraints is slightly cheaper than most other scenarios, but it is about the same price for these cleaner policy scenarios. The policy scenarios with households is more expensive because we are adding emission constraints, or sorry, emission costs that then get added on top. So that's worth looking at.